The original man, John Pierpont Morgan, is actually one of my favorite investors of all time, kind of like an investing hero. Obviously, he lived in a very different world than we live in today, but I think there's a lot of timeless lessons from his career, personally speaking, at least. Very often, when we get into these annual reports, we realize that founders inject the DNA of a company, and so maybe a few things about the man come up. We're gonna hopefully demystify. I think a lot of people kind of have the general sense that J.P. Morgan Chase has, well, more money than God. What do they actually do? That's this question we're gonna try to tackle by doing our classic opening move, gathering facts based on that opening move. Eventually, I'll transition to unraveling the story behind the numbers, and finally, we'll consult with our Sage Seeds AI what the numbers are saying after they've been distilled to a ranking. Now, JP Morgan Chase is going to be the 48th company in the 2022 season, one being the highest, 48 being possibly as bad as it gets. I'd love for you guys to guess as we go along, and even in the comments, maybe even justify what you're seeing that justifies a top half finish, a bottom half finish, whatever your head's at. With that said, let's dive in so that your wisdom can blossom. Straight to the financial statements. Oh gosh, they have 140 pages roughly of financial statements. This is gonna be fun, I guess. I really should be more careful. I should be finding the easier companies to read. Okay, the income statement. Here we have revenue broken up into all sorts of non-interest income, and then we have the interest revenue. Now you will notice that more of their revenue in the later years has come from interest income compared to what is sometimes called fee income or non-interest income. That's not always the case. Just looking a few years back, you might remember something called low interest rates. Seems like a lifetime ago, but that used to happen. And back then, JP Morgan was still making over 50 billion annually. And so, does the interest rate environment really matter to a baller like this? It doesn't seem like it. It's based on this one row. Either way, though, they're actually pretty even. A lot of the banking industry sees that as a huge positive. So is it positive? I don't know. It depends on what the bank is good at, in my opinion, as an investor. JP Morgan here saying we're good at everything. So compensation expense, that is quite high. But, good on the bankers, I guess. Overall, we're looking at a net margin of about, is that right? About net margin in the high 20s. Moving on to the balance sheet. These are such huge numbers, guys. Now, keep in mind, this right here means 500 billion. That's insane. That's huge. While they are breaking down a lot, we're going to simplify it by going to the total assets over the total liabilities. This is a ratio of about 1.1. Efficient in the sense that every dollar that depositors give them, so that you and I and small businesses, large businesses, that people put into the bank, they are effective at loaning it out. Great stuff. We also want to, for banks, understand the defensive position. What happens in the worst case, quote unquote, judgment day, if you want to be really dramatic. 300 billion in extra assets compared to liabilities. We want to get as close to one without going below one, because then you get into trouble. What is the quality of that point? One, we're looking for 300 billion on the asset side. We're looking at about 260 billion in premises and equipment, goodwill, and other intangible assets, and just general other assets. This is their buffer. If you decide that these are low quality, well then basically that 1.1 looks just like 1. Statement of cash flow time. As the interest rates have gone up, they have actually borrowed less securities. Slow, deliberate moves from this bank. Love to see it. On the investing side, they've a little bit slowed down the purchases of available for sale securities. They might be waiting for something, not to read too much into it, but they're definitely going into cash a little bit. I should emphasize a little bit. Actually, is this correct? They've been losing deposits. Interesting. It's not even half of what they gained in deposits last year. So it's a small blip, really. Just an interesting tidbit. From the opening move, what I really took away is that this is a bank that is seemingly efficient. Certainly, just looking at a cursory level, the financial statements, everything looks efficient. They are acting like they're efficient, being slow, deliberate, not really feeling like they have to change much. The buffer that they're leaving in some ways could be these intangible assets. I want to just get a sense for the quality of that buffer, because if it's a decent quality, then no red flags there, well then just let them do what they do, really. Okay, we have made it to note 15 to the item 8. They have a section for goodwill. Here they have it broken down. It seems to be in line with past years too, which is a big positive. For banks, it's a pretty slow moving industry. I think if we were to zoom out a bit, we would see this actually be increasing substantially compared to a decade ago. I don't really know though, that would be bordering on speculation. Pretty safe here. I would call this overall a high quality goodwill. I'm gonna give it the thumbs up. The actual worst case scenario type of exam kind of passes a sniff test. A sniff test is what we did here. Let's look for intangible assets now. Popping over to the item 7, this is the best bullet point section I can find, the best little blurb I can find about the definition of other intangibles. We're really looking at for about 5 billion-ish of intangibles, I would guess, maybe 5 to 10 billion in the worst case. For JPMorgan, we were talking about how much money they have, it's almost negligible. It's like pennies to them, unfortunately. Maybe not unfortunately, fortunately for them. Like what they mean by intangibles are things that were purchased as quote unquote intangibles in acquisitions that JPMorgan just is keeping for they're more filing errors, and you would even call them rounding errors at this size than anything else. Let me go back to the balance sheet and show you 50 to 55 billion of this number passes a sniff test. The other intangible assets did not pass the sniff test, which again is at worst maybe 15 to 10% of this line item, which look how small this is compared to total assets. Let's move on to looking for premises and equipment. Hey, if you're getting more comfortable uncovering the stories behind the numbers, please like and subscribe. Okay, this includes improvements to things that they're leasing, so just office improvements. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's really it, so just... Okay, so going back to this, I'm making the claim that without these three, JPMorgan would basically be darn close to lending out every single dollar that it receives. Premises and equipment is literally just chairs, offices, computers, mostly things like that. They could sell for a lot of this, but it would all be used. And so I'm going to say it doesn't necessarily pass the sniff test for me. That's 10% of the buffer. This row here, I'm breaking up. About 5% of the buffer doesn't pass the sniff test, so that's 15% total. The other 80% of this row though, I'm going to say the goodwill and SMSRs does pass the sniff test. It seems like legitimate value they could get and maintain in the worst case. So that's good. And then other assets is passing the sniff test. I mean, this primarily is involved with things related to their non-core businesses. I hate to say non-core because they're so huge and they take them seriously, but one good example would be their auto loan business. They do have auto loan business, and as part of the auto loan business, they often collect collateral. And so if you've had something repossessed and anything like that, that would show up as other assets, and that's not all of it, but that's the bulk of what other assets is here. That stuff, do keep in mind, is that banks very rarely don't benefit from repossessing. I don't want to say too much because obviously different banks handle this wildly differently. But in general, banks much rather would never repossess. They would just rather you pay back the money they loaned you. Overall, their buffer is repossessions, office equipment, and then being able to maintain the brand names, basically, of acquisitions they've done in the past. That is what is holding back liabilities from becoming larger than assets. That's a lot of confidence. Basically, is the quickest way I'll sum it up. The closer you are to one, the more pressure there is on your finance guys to manage risk effectively. Did you make good commitments when times were good in order to basically survive times that are rough? This is a relatively thin buffer between liabilities and assets. And that's not bad. That's just showing you why they're probably the largest bank in the world. They're definitely in the top 5, top 3 even largest banks in the world. They have trillions and trillions of dollars because they're very, very confident in their ability to manage that much money. Well, let's consult with the Sage Seeds AI right away. I don't think I felt necessarily so confused yet in any of the videos. This company, I'm not really sure. I definitely want to see what the AI has to say. So much money, so much profit, so much activity that they're plugged into. Yet, what is their core strength? Like, what usually when you see really good investments, really good value, it's because there's a something that you can point to why they deserve that economic value. JP Morgan's kind of everywhere, all the time, doing everything, and they're confident. So I guess I'm confident. Please like, subscribe. And I'm very keen on understanding if you guys and girls like this. Over time, maybe you guys will learn my strengths and weaknesses and stuff. But financial services businesses, I'm very, very comfortable with, actually. I know that that's not necessarily something that is shared by a lot of people. And so if you guys want to get more comfortable with these types of businesses specifically, or even other industries, let me know so I can kind of look into them, kind of see what I can do. Down in the comments, share your wisdom, share this video. JPM is ranked 35 out of 48 in value for the 2022 season. Now, I get it makes sense. And seeing this, it makes sense. Thanks again to the Sage Seeds AI. I mean, I don't know what I would do if I didn't. It's so useful, even if just as a check or sometimes a confirmation of what I was thinking. I guess I was thinking it would be somewhere in the middle because I was so unsure. I was kind of thinking it would be somewhere in the middle, but it's in the bottom half, bottom third. That kind of makes sense because why else would I be so doubtful, I guess? Put my instincts aside, let's look at the calculations behind the Sage Seeds AI. I'm going to do a quick interpretation. What you got to pay attention to is that net income, those 30 billions, I think I mentioned there was a 20% net margin. The AI seems to be picking up that, yes, that's a correct margin when calculating based on sales. Net margin is not really showing itself as very meaningful. It's not a very correlated factor, would be the language of the AI. What instead it's focusing on is how much return is being generated a year, how much net income, as a basis of the size of assets, the size of deposits. And when you consider that it's making 30 billion, 40 billion some years, when it has 3 trillion in assets, now all of a sudden you're looking at about a 1 to 2 to maybe 3%. In other words, JP Morgan's making only a couple percentage points off of all the money that we're giving it. That kind of shows the state of banking, is that decades ago, that would have been 6-7%. That's double what it is at now. And so in the last couple decades, it seems like banks just aren't really encouraged, or it's gotten so competitive that banks just don't make a lot of money off of deposits anymore. Now, JP Morgan's doing all these other things, but at least the way Sage Seeds AI is boiling it down, so much of the business is banking. If banking isn't a great business, the AI is not really gonna rank you very highly. I think, I'd like to toot my own horn a little bit. Maybe this is why I was confused. I saw these giant numbers, got kind of enamored with them. But I just got the sense that, is this actually a big number for them? And thanks to the AI, I can confirm the big numbers are more of a distraction. JP Morgan, great business in a not so great industry.